So the very first question as a part of our interview series, we are very honored to have you, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, kindly share with us your personal reminiscences with His Grace Dr. Paulos Mar Gregorios.
So, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
In fact, it's a long story. It started in 1980.
Okay.
And that time I was doing PhD at Jawaharlal Nehru University. And I had joined here in 1979. And then there was an institute, and it is still there. It is called Indian Philosophical Congress, IPC. It was established in 1925 by Mahatma Gandhi and Raghwendra Tagore. So there are annual congresses held, all across India. So that year in 1980, 1979, I had sent my paper. It was accepted, and then I was invited to give a presentation. I went there in 1980 January at Utkal University, Bhubaneswar. So uh, there was one session that is known symposium, and that symposium was on religion, democracy, and secularism. And Dr. Paulus Mar Gregorios was one of the symposiasts there. And there were three more persons, four people were there, and each were given half an hour's time to give a presentation, and there was a question answer session also. Somehow, as we can see that the way he was dressed and with all these symbols and everything, we could find it out that he is deeply a religious man, and he will be defending only the religious aspect. Maybe he'll be critical of democracy and also of secularism, but nothing of the sort happened because he took purely academic dimension of it. And the actual finding of his lecture was that it's only in democracy that both religion and also secularism can coexist, and very well argued. So, and there was, huge applaud every time. So all the points he put up, and in a very peaceful manner, a smiling face, graceful personality. So, very attractive kind of a person he was there. Some questions were also raised, and he replied to all those questions very nicely. Particularly, he said that, look, there are certain states like Saudi Arabia, Iran, these are religious states. And you cannot think of democracy in such states because they have their own kinds of religious doctrines, dogmas, and everything. And then there is a communal state like Lebanon, and Christian community and the Muslim community, and they share the platform. President will be from the Christian community, and Prime Minister will be from the Muslim community, and still they coexisted in the communal state. But then there are secular states that included India also, in which state is something which maintains equidistance from all religions, because state doesn't have a religion kind of a thing. But it's not a kind of a thing that where separation between state and religion has taken place the way it happened in the Treaty of Westphalia 1648. And that way it is not there because now things have changed. So he proposed that it's in the democracy that secularism and religion also, they can flourish. Questions were asked to him that, look, how can secularism and religion coexist? Because secularism is something which doesn't believe in religion, and religion is something which is not at all secular. He said that no, there is enough space in a democratic setup where both can exist. And there's the beauty of democratic setup. It will not happen in a religious state, and it will also not happen strictly secular kind of a thing the way it is there in the France, for instance. So in a very international perspective, and also in a sense of deeply religious kind of a thing, so he defended this position. We were all very impressed by him, by his presentation. I could not ask any question because there was no time. So I sent a slip to him through somebody, that, sir, I want to have little time with you. There are certain questions I want to get it clarified. And he looked at it and he said, who is this boy? He said, he's doing PhD at Jawaharlal Nehru University. He said, okay, tell him to meet me tomorrow during lunchtime. So the next day, in fact, I was waiting for him. So he came out with 2 or 3 people were around him. Then he said, gentlemen, please excuse me, I have given time to this young boy. So he sat with me, and there was somebody who helped us to get the food also. So the food came and we started discussing many issues in and around secularism. And he clarified that how this term came up, because he knew Latin, he knew French, he knew German, so many languages he knew. Then he said that, look at the Latin origin of, secular, saculum or secularis, the terms, it came, in the pre-Christian Latin term, kind of a thing. And then he explained it. And also he came back to the way it was used, the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648, and secularism as an ism is a 19th century nomenclature, and the way it was used by Nehru when the partition of India started taking place in 15th August 1947. So that time Mr. Jinnah had said that Pakistan will become a religious state, Islamic state. So Jawaharlal Nehru said that, look, India will become a secular state. He said, I'm not questioning Nehru's understanding of secular kind of a thing, but because it was a very difficult time and he had to take a decision very quickly, and he did it with his liberal education and kind of a thing. So we accept it. And he gave all the details and nitty-gritty things, which in fact one will take years to read and understand it, which was just clarified by him in just 15-20 minutes time. And I took all the notes, and now I have got the way to go into the books to find out the exact picture of it. Yeah. So it was very enlightening experience with him. And we were there for 4 days at Utkal University, Bhubaneswar. And every day after that, we used to meet there. Very fascinating experience I had with him. And then the next year, in 1981, the Congress was held at Gujarat University, Ahmedabad. So there, in fact, he had chaired one session also, and in which I had the opportunity to present my paper. Besides that, more interesting thing was that we were put up in the guest house, and he was my neighbor in the guest house. So he used to wake up early in the morning and he was walking in the corridor. Then I said, Father, you want something? He said, I'm waiting for the cup of tea. It has not yet reached. So then he said, let's chit chat for the time being. It will be more tasty than the tea. And then there was a table bench, and we started, again discussing certain things there. And he used to all the time, getting it clarified. There was nothing like that we can get it recorded. But the interesting thing which happened, and then we continued discussing it for the rest of the 3 days also separately after the seminar, during off time, lunch time, dinner time also. Dinner was hosted by the Chief Minister at that time. So that thing happened. So because in 1979, there was Soviet intervention in Afghanistan. And then there was US intervention in Iran. So Soviet Union, when it intervened in Afghanistan, then there were Taliban who were backed by the US. So Taliban were religious people, and the government which was there, from Soviet side in Afghanistan was very liberal and democratic kind of a thing. But if we go back to Iran, there the Shah was a liberal person, and Mujahideens were the orthodox religious people kind of a thing. So I thought that, look, what kind of an ideology is there? They should hold a consistent position, at least. And here they are doing, taking two kinds of games. In fact, this was the impression that I chose for my PhD topic, German idealism, just to understand that how, in fact, contradictory viewpoints can develop simultaneously in a particular historical phase. If the geography changes, contradictory views can be, found out there. And he also started, kind of a thing, and uh, he was not happy with the intervention aspect of it. He said, let the revolution develop from the soil itself. It should not be imposed. And also the resistance should develop within the soil itself. It should not be backed by anybody. So that will create a healthy kind of a thing. Otherwise, it will create some kind of a resurgence of ideas. So then next year I did not go to the Congress because of some other engagements in the university, and I was also in a position to complete my thesis. So, but in 1983, there was a call given by People's Republic of China and also supported by USSR that this is the 100th death anniversary of Karl Marx. And we should have national and international conferences on Marx's philosophy, whether it is living or dead or requires to be modified. If modified, then to what extent? So in 1983, we had a seminar in which Dr. Gregorios was having a full session. So 3-hour session was there, and he was there, and he had three presentations, and he was intervening every time and guiding, giving us the guidance and everything. And that time we found that he said that, look, it's 100 years now, Marx is writing and all that stuff. But we definitely need to look at, what are the living aspects in Marxism. And there are two very clearly defined dimensions of Marxism, he said. One is its methodology, and the other is the actual practice, which was there. As far methodology is concerned, dialectical and historical materialism, he said it will sustain. But as the actual practice is concerned, it was not consistently practiced by Lenin or Stalin, and it needs to be questioned. And people will question, all these things. And he was also not very much satisfied, though he was awarded Order of Lenin, kind of a thing, award also, Dr. Gregorios. So I think it was just 1 year before he was awarded this kind of a thing, before the crisis started in Soviet Union, something like that. One has to confirm it. So, and then he said Marxism as a methodology will continue, but Marxism as a practice, the way it has been done by Soviet Union and the Central and East European countries and People's Republic of China, they all have to refresh their ideas, kind of a thing. And that gave us to look at this this phenomenon of Marxism in a very, a different way. And the 1980s, as you can see, was a period, that decade was a decade of turmoil. So Soviet intervention was, of course, there, and American intervention was there in Iran, and Mujahideens and Talibans, they were coming up. Plus, people started questioning, and Poland was also trying to go to democracy. And this man, Gorbachev, he had become the president, and he was also in favor of that kind of a thing, that Poland should go to democracy. And it did go to democracy, and after that, everything started collapsing. And by the end of the decade, we find that Soviet Union collapsed, and Marxism as an ideology failed. Marxism as a methodology is still there. But Dr. Gregorios said that we had only 70 years of experience with socialism, but we have a 200 years experience of liberalism, and liberalism is still there. So we have to look at the potentials of liberalism again, and look at the fresh points of it. That was the time when John Rawls also wrote his book, A Theory of Justice, where he was talking about all kinds of, that least privileged ones, we must be given some incentives, otherwise, society will not be stable. So this way it kept on going, and we found that, it is in this context that the certain terms like glasnost and perestroika were floated. Openness and all kinds of, restructuring and everything started taking place. And of which People's Republic of China just managed to escape. Tiananmen Square kind of, episode which also happened. And Dr. Gregorios came two times more, and he again, sometimes actually some of his friends also came from East Germany. So they visited India because they were looking for some kind of, input from India also. Maybe Gandhi can help us, maybe Vivekananda can help us, because there was intellectual vacuum with them. So they had come to us. And then Dr. Gregorios told us in one of the lectures, he had invited two guests also from Germany, that there is a, deep intellectual crisis in Europe, and with the collapse of socialism. And there are many of his friends who have committed suicide because they said that this new phenomenon is not something, because the whole life they taught about the evils of capitalism. And now they have to have a compromise with capitalism only. So it was a very sad kind of a thing which happened. And uh, he was, in fact, sure that one day definitely Marxism will again come, because he proposed that there are two basic ideologies. One is the developmentalism and the other is revolutionary. But development has a limit. These days we can see that there has to be a limit of information also. Our mind is full of information, but there has to be a limit to it. So we have to go back to something which is to the books and to the ideas in a different manner. So because of all these things happening, and as you can see, JNU is already having a left-oriented kind of a thinking. So we said that he is a bishop, but his ideas are, like any Marxist also. Then we floated the idea that he is a red bishop. So people started appreciating it. Yes, he is very progressive man. But in fact, he used to give the intellectual explanation of the phenomenon in a purely academic manner. And because in GNU, people generally find that they are so much ideologically biased. And here is a man who has the ideology, but he is still open to other views. And there is enough scope and rigorous kind of a thing. He used to give hundreds of books as references. That look, this book. Even most of the philosophers whom we were reading, they were his friends. He said, look, the people whom you are referring, they are my friends. We used to have lunch and dinners together. So you don't have to inform me. I'm well informed about them. And they included Gadamer, they included Habermas, they included Richard Rorty, Chomsky, people like them. They said that they listen to us. So all over world, very versatile. So that way we used to call him. And then we used to see him in uh, many ways. So there's a very long story, because as I said, that 16, 17 years association with him. And so some international conferences, and sometimes he used to come to us also. And I'll come to some other events which were very fascinating, in the course of time. So if you can raise some other questions, then we can just incorporate it. But this is how it has started, and the journey was unending, kind of. We were all the time looking. Every semester, we had sorted out that we are going to invite these guests for lectures.
Your words are so striking to the thoughts, and to the teachings of Dr. Paulos Mar Gregorios. My second question also is a bit related to the very first question, that is your experiences in the national and international conferences. What have you
Yeah.
learned through him, through Dr.
Yes.
Paulos Mar
Yes. Yes.
Gregorios Association?
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, there were a number of, like in 1983, Marx's centenary celebration was there. And there we had got the insight that which direction philosophy is now going to move. And then, in fact, then this IPC, Indian Philosophical Congress, 1985, they had a Diamond Jubilee session at Hyderabad University. So where the then Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi had come to inaugurate that event at the Central University, Hyderabad. So Dr. Gregorios was there, and he had again was there as a symposiast there. And that time, in fact, there was one topic of future of socialism. So he said that it will take a lot of time for me to develop these ideas, and but he gave us that the same viewpoints, that as a methodology, it will sustain in the future also. It will fascinate the people. To understand and explain the social phenomenon, we needed Marxist approach to understand it. It may not be useful for the scientists because dialectics is not operating in nature, as Einstein had already said. But it is definitely there. And then, in fact, a number of other seminars also took place in India. And but more interesting thing which happened was in 1992. There was one international conference, Phenomenology and Indian Metaphysics, 4-day international conference, funded by ICPR, and it was organized by Dr. Gregorios himself. The whole seminar he organized. He had invited people, whom he knew and who are academically sound. And of course, I was also invited and telephonically called by him that I should come there. So in 1992, and at that time I was associate professor in JNU. So after completing my PhD in 1985, then I became assistant professor. And immediately after that, in 1992, I got promoted to associate professorship. So I went there. 4-day international seminar at 8:30 a.m. he used to come. It was held at Teen Murti Museum and Library and Museum. So that was the residence of the late Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru. So on the back side, there's beautiful auditorium. They have it just above the library. So it was there, and early in the morning, he will circulate a leaflet that look, yesterday we had these discussions, but these are the issues which have yet been not answered properly. Please address all these questions, and then we'll proceed. And see that 9 a.m. everybody is there. He himself is at 8:30 a.m. there. And 9 a.m. the session will start. Very punctual, and no delay for anything. He said that if you delay at one place, it will delay everything else. So very punctual, and most of the intellectuals, they all had come from Hellenic Republic of Greece, from UK. Richard Sorabji was there, from USA, from Canada, from Germany, and from erstwhile Soviet Union. Also, they were not in a position to come because of the crisis in Soviet Union, but some of them managed to come. 2 persons at least came there, and from Japan also they were there. People were there. So from Indian side, number of philosophers were there. So, and P.K. Mukhopadhyay, Sivajivan Bhattacharya, D.P. Chattopadhyay, Bala Subramaniam, a number of people, they were all there. And it was very intense. So, in fact, next day people heard up in JNU that there is a wonderful seminar going on at Teen Murti, and they all came up. There was no place to sit. Then he said, you come and sit here in the middle of it. There is a well, so there. So all the issues were, taken up very seriously, particularly the metaphysical position which had developed in India. and the epistemological quest which we find in the West. So how to create some kind of intellectual meeting point between them. And Dr. Gregorios was all the time insisting on this issue, like the notion of reality. So when we say that, what is it to be real and how real is reality? Then the way it is thought by the West is that a reality is something which exists as a fact or a thing without imagination and imitations. But in India, it has much wider application, like Satya, Vastava, Yatharth, Purusharth, Paramarth. These are all real. So in Indian philosophy. And plus, he said that the four religions which are indigenous, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism, then four religions which came from outside, Zoroastrianism, Jewish religion, Zoroastrianism, Christianity, and Islam. And then there are religions of diaspora like Tibetan Buddhism, Baha'i faith, but they all are there. The plurality is there. Plurality is the driving force. There was a contact, there was a conflict, but it's the confluence which prevailed all over. And so, Sarva Dharma Samabhava. In fact, he gave the example also, it's written on your church also, Nilay, something like that, isn't it? I'm forgetting the name.
It is a Sarva Dharma Nilaya.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's there. He said that I've inscribed it.
Yeah.
So it was perhaps in 1982 that the building of the church was also came up, and there was a first page write up on the Times of India that time, that if you take the aerial picture of that church, it looks like Jantar Mantar. So, and that was designed by Dr. Gregorios himself. So he was an architect also. So he was one man with all the capacities. So it is still there. If you take whenever I go to ICB, because I was a member of ICE Council, for 6 years, also in the governing body. And besides that, we used to go there. So whenever we go, and I have my students also, I say that, look, here's the church. If you take its aerial picture, it looks like Jantar Mantar. So that structure is there. So I don't know if you are aware of it, but it is there. You know it, yeah? So, yeah. So then number of questions about epistemological issues like pramanas and in Indian tradition, how it has developed. And Nagarjuna, who was a critique of all the pramana, he said, what is the pramana? First pramana, the pratyaksha. How do we understand it? In the West also, people had raised this question. Hegel had raised this question against Kant. Adorno, in his book Against Epistemology, had raised this question against the Enlightenment and everything. So he said that at some basic point, you find that philosophy is a foundational subject. In fact, he thought that philosophy, history, and mathematics, these are the three foundational subjects, disciplines. Because without philosophy, you cannot understand anything. There is a political philosophy, there is a philosophy of history, and there is a philosophy of sociology, because philosophy is the foundational subject. Without history also, you cannot go into the ideas. So you need those ideas, historical aspect. Similarly, about sciences, you cannot study any of the sciences without mathematics. And the foundation of mathematics is philosophy. So philosophy is very important subject. And then he found that as a foundational subject, philosophers have taken up, different positions, but at some point they all meet together. So that was a wonderful thing. And a 4 days international seminar was very intense, very rewarding kind of a thing. Number of papers, I kept those papers for 12, 13 years. I kept on reading those papers. So then in 1993, I was told that he has got some cardiac problem and he was hospitalized. But as soon as he recovered, then again, as usual, he got back to his business of going to the universities and lecturing and clarifying the issues and everything else, because he was a man who was academic and also religious orthodox, religious person, and also, lot of other engagements were also there, cultural, man of culture, because for him, no culture is foreign to him. So he can very comfortably go to German culture, Spanish culture, and he will like to have a, cuisine also, all kinds of food and everything, very fond of, nice food and everything. And discipline was something very important for him. So we did not hear anything. So we had sent our messages to the church that please, if he comes, tell him that we were all remembering him. And if he has a time, he should contact us, the contact number and everything we had left. So in 1995, we got the message that he wants to come to JNU. So, and we invited him. That time my book was also published, The Dialectic of Reason. So I requested him to release the book, and he said that you give me a copy of the book first. So I went to the church, and I went to those stairs, 4 or 5 stairs. Then right hand side was his study room. Yeah, on the back of it there was a garden, lovely flowers and everything was there. Very nice place. I spent almost, I think, more than 1 hour so with him, and he saw my book. He said, I'll go through it, and it will be my pleasure to release it that day. Then he said that, what is the topic you guys want me to speak? Then I said, sir, your lecture on future of socialism remain inconclusive. We want you to finish it. Tell us more about it. He said, okay. So he took a note of it. And then that was the time when postmodern philosophy was also coming up in a big way after the crisis in France and everything in the 60s. So then he said, what else you are doing these days? He asked me. Then I said that, Father, I'm just writing a book on postmodernity, particularly Jacques Derrida and Michel Foucault. And I'll take up the critical theories later on. But as of now, then he started giving a lecture on Derrida and Foucault. Then I said, Father, would you like to write a foreword to my book? He said, you show me the manuscript. I said, okay, I'll give you that day when you come for the lecture. Manuscript was ready. So I gave it to him. And he said, you contact me after 15-20 days. And he came to JNU and he gave the lecture. Some of the photographs I've already shared with you, releasing the book and giving the lecture. And the dean of the school, Professor S.R. Kidwai, was the one who had chaired. And that time the chairperson of the Philosophy Center, Professor Suman Gupta, she had given the welcome. She had welcomed him. And we had a kind of committee hall, it's called, and which has a capacity of 150, but it was packed completely. Maybe around more than 350 people or 400 people had come. There was not even a little space left there. Then he was said that, but the people standing on the back, they can't hear me. Can you put a piece of mic there also? So then we thought that we were not ready for that, but anyway. So he spoke very eloquently on the liberal and the revolutionary ideologies which are prevailing that time. And with the clash between these two, there are various other trends which have also started emerging. Like postmodernity started coming up, multiculturalism had started, globalization was coming up, So it was all because there is an imminent sense of crisis even in liberalism also. That's why globalization started coming up. And India also started going to globalization in 1990s. So Dr. Manmohan Singh was the finance minister that time, and with Mr. Narasimha Rao as the prime minister, and he was in favor of that thing. So liberalizing the economy, opening the doors and everything. He said this is the need because liberalism has to be there and there is no socialism to put a constraint on it. Socialism is already gone, and there was inflation rate in Soviet Union, erstwhile Soviet Union, which got divided into, I think, 15, 16 republics, because It was Marxism as an ideology which was binding. Soviet Union was not a state. It was a kind of union of state. When the ideology became vacuous, then states started, becoming independent. So Hungary became independent. All the country republics, they started. Corruption was rampant, and he gave us a number of examples of. I remember Edward Shevardnadze, who was the Georgian president that time. Earlier, he was the foreign minister. So there were a lot of charges and everything which came up. So he said that economy was, shrinking. There was no job. Inflation was there, and in fact, in East Germany, the birth rate went below 70%. It was market genocide. Nobody, no woman was ready to get married and have children. They cannot afford. And this was all because of that crisis in Soviet Union. And number of examples he gave. But finally, he said that liberalism, globalization, and everything else has definitely a limit. And it is the socialism which will again come back, because the kind of mission which Marx had of equal humanity is something which will prevail again. When will it happen? I don't know. He said very clearly that maybe it will not happen in my lifetime, but it will definitely happen in your lifetime, pointing fingers to me that time, that it will definitely happen in your lifetime. So I'm waiting for it to happen. So it was very, lot of questions were raised. It was 3-hour lecture that day. So we came at 2 p.m. until 5, it went on. And then we had a tea break after that. So then another half an hour or 45 minutes spent with him. Then he went to the church. And he used to drive. Those days he was not able to drive himself. 1995, he had a driver. Earlier he used to drive himself that car. So then I got a call after 10 days that he has written the foreword to my book. So I went to the church, and it was 15, 16 page foreword he wrote to my book, very comprehensive foreword. And that is there in my book, Philosophy, Modern and Postmodern. And in fact, the book was given to the publisher. I gave it to the publisher, and but it somehow it did not come out when he was alive. So bigger publisher, they take a lot of time. It was published in 1997. So and then later on, in fact, I dedicated the book to him, to Dr. Mar Gregorios. So and the second volume also came up in 2002. That includes the critical theories and everything else. So I had gone to the church to give that book personally to the person who was there. So in 1996, I was told that he is very sick, but somehow I think he called Professor Suman Gupta, my teacher that time. So, and also head of the department, that he wants to meet us. And he said that the young boy who is associate professor in your department, he should also come. So we all went there. I had my PhD students also. She also had it. So in 3 cars, we went there. And some of them came up by buses also. So we again sat in that room only, that is study room. No, it was on the right-hand side, there was another room also. One was his office room, where he used to sit on his table chair and everything, and visitors were there. There was another room also adjacent to it. So where, 15, I think at least 12 or 15 people can sit comfortably. So we were there, and I saw Father Gregorios coming to the that thing. His right hand and right leg was paralyzed. So without any slipper in his leg, because it cannot hold anything, he was not able to hold the slippers in his leg. So little bit crawling also, but he came there and he took the chair. And the first day he spoke on socialism, humanism, and secularism. And he said that I have some commitments to socialism, and but I'm very skeptical of humanism and secularism both, and I'll give my reasons why I'm doing it. And he gave it. He gave it was a 2-hour lecture, 2-hour long lecture that day, and all the time smiling, and lot of snacks and all kinds of things started coming to us. We enjoyed everything. So, and then he said that I would like to meet you guys again. Then I said next time we want to speak on postmodernism. He said you come after 10 to 12 days or maybe 2 weeks. So after 10 days, then I asked him. He said, okay, after 3 days, you guys come. So we again went there. So that time he spoke on postmodernism, and very informative kind of a thing. I got it recorded. In fact, I got recorded both the lectures. So, and then, in fact, yeah, it was in 1996 again that this lecture came up, and we used to listen. So it was perhaps, in fact, 12th of November, that lecture took place in 1996. So we had come back, and he said that after 15 days, you again contact me. I'll give another lecture. So I was just waiting for the 12 days to come to confirm that after 15 days you had said we should come. Should we come? So, but then in the early morning, I got the message that he has passed away last night. So I informed my teacher also, some of my students, and they said, this is what has happened. And they said, let's go there. Then also we said, okay, we have to definitely go there. So we went there, we reached there, we found it out what time, because he was in the hospital. So what time the body is coming. And then we went there around, I think 11:30 or 12. And the van brought the bodies around 1 p.m., I think. So that time he was sitting on the chair, and that time, and still looking as if he is going to speak on again to us. Such a graceful personality.
This is a very, very right observation, sir. Still, he was
Yeah,
teaching, even though he passed
yeah.
away. That position, very, very true, very true.
Every time it seems that he is just going to give a lecture. So again, in some topic, yeah. So, and that also in a very smiling face. So we paid our tributes, and we also wrote in the register which was there. There's a huge loss of philosophy which cannot be replaced, and put our signatures and date and everything. And we came back. I was very depressed with his death. So what I did, I started listening to those lectures which I had recorded. Then I thought that why not I should transcribe it. So I started transcribing those lectures. And so it took me around a week or 10 days time to transcribe it. And then I contacted the editor of Journal of Indian Council of Philosophical Research. This is the best journal in India. So it is published by Indian Council of Philosophical Research, just your, next door neighbor. So there, and Professor Daya Krishna was the editor that time. Then he said that, oh my God, in fact, I was just thinking of contacting him, and he died. And then I said that these are the 2 lectures he had given on this date and this date, and I have transcribed it. And I take the full responsibility of the ideas which are there. And recording is also with me. So he said that just give it to me. And he read it. And after 10 days, he said that I'm going to publish it. So it was published in the JICPR, and I have already shared that publication with you separately. And that was a fascinating document. After that, some more people came to me from the IE and from some other magazines also. They wanted to have that recording and everything. I said, no, it's not, I cannot share it. I have already transcribed it and it's getting published. It will be a violation of that kind of a thing. But the brief version was also brought out in, there was a magazine which is now, I think, stopped, IE kind of a thing. So it came out there also very briefly, where in one of the earlier volumes, I was there. We all had gone to the church. Rodolphe de Lippe, he was there. I don't know if he is alive. He was very old that time. Rodolphe de Lippe, Dr. Gregorios, myself, and C.K. Raju, Chandrakant Raju. C.K. Raju was also very long associated with Dr. Gregorios. So he has number of YouTube programs. He is now settled in Bangalore, old but still active. Chandrakant Raju. So he was also there. So we were only 7-8 people. We are very, not many people. So we had spent around 4 hours there. In fact, we had our dinner also in the church itself. So the ground floor, right, left-hand side, there was a huge room. So, and then Father Gregorios, he came up to the roadside to drop us back. Every time he used to come, and not only from the church, but he will come outside of the church to the roadside. When we are settled in the car, then he will go back. So that was the hospitality and generosity. We always had it, very rare kind of a thing from such a big personality. So that book kind of a thing which came up. And after that, I found that because he was a regular contributor and also attending all the conferences of philosophy, but people have some kind of a temperament of forgetting the person, but he's a person who is worth remembering. So then I think it's a very good effort you are doing, on your side, to bringing out his philosophical ideas and commitments, and philosophy as a foundational subject. Because if you are deeply rooted in philosophy, then you can defend other positions also. Because if your philosophy vision is consistent, only then you can look forward. So I'm so happy to know that you have taken this initiative, and if there is any other event taking place in remembering him, I'll be very happy to join. So we can come to the next question.
A major role in the development of a civilization.
Yes, in fact, civilization and culture. Culture is in fact the cultivation of ideas, values, and everything else, with the affinity and diversity aspects of it. So culture is the one which people inherit from the past and also transmit it to the next generation. But when we come to the civilizations, so it refers to the institutions. Like education could be the culture, but universities and colleges are the civilizations therein. Like democracy is a culture, but parliament is a civilization. So when you talk about the institutions, then it becomes civilizational aspect. Otherwise, it remains some kind of cultural gift to the humanity. So civilizations have to sustain, and they sustain provided their ideas are something which are very strongly defended, placed, and everything. So like a democratic setup in the institutions, justice prevailing in the institution, because justice is always an institution. So just or unjust institutions we talk about. So these are the ideas and values which are there to strengthen the institutions. Philosophy is required therein, because if philosophy as a foundational subject, we always need the philosophical reflection on those issues. So civilizations are built on the basis of cultural edifice with critical analysis, because civilizations refer to the institutions and sustenance of the institutions, which require values in the institution so that ethos could develop, and all that. So if the institutions are stabilized and strong and democratically justified way, then the people who are produced, they are also equally important citizens of the country. Yeah. So institutions have to be protected. One should not act in a way that it affects the institution as a whole. And Dr. Gregorios, in fact, he used to run many schools here in Delhi at house cars, and he used to give us the examples of those schools. But he is the one who used to go there personally to see everything and look at all the infrastructure, whether it is well maintained, even the flowers and everything, the students, children, and everything. He used to look after every kind of a thing. So I think that I have never visited that church. He used to call us. It's somewhere in the house khas.
Yes, yes,
So yeah, St. Paul School, something like that.
yes,
Yeah,
yes. They have a school there.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how the institutions can be instrument of sustenance and development, and then it goes to the universities and other places also. So because education as an institution is very important component of it.
Mar Gregorius talks about CGCS, which is Comprehensive Global Common Security, in which all people have the right to live in security without the threat of poverty, unemployment, nuclear wars, illiteracy, fanaticism, communal conflicts, monopolist governance, etc. Is this necessary for a peaceful coexistence and development?
Yeah, in fact, this doctrine he had floated long back, and he used to give a reference to this kind of a thing, comprehensive global common security kind of a thing, because the kind of world in which we are all living, so a threat to anybody is a threat to all. A war against anybody is a war against everybody. So a crisis anywhere in the country is a crisis everywhere. So we cannot remain indifferent, to something happening either in Afghanistan or Iran or in Central Asian countries, or the collapse of socialism and everything. So because it is having earth-shaking event impact kind of a thing. So he thought, and this vision is something which is very much like the one which Immanuel Kant had it. In 1795, Immanuel Kant wrote a book called The Perpetual Peace, 1795. That time, England had become a nation state, France had become a nation state, and USA had come as a nation state, and Spain was in the process of making, Germany was also in the process of coming up as a nation state. But Kant thought that gradually in the whole world, we will find that nation states are there and they will have certain conflicts. We need an international body to resolve those conflicts. So this was the idea behind the League of Nations in 1922 and then United Nations Organization in 1945. It came up. So the idea was there in Immanuel Kant's mind, 150 years back before Immanuel actually came to mind. He was that kind of a person. He said that there will be international attacks and threats or insecurities. There must be some international body. In fact, this idea of this CGCS is something which is on the line of that thinking, that we should have a global security forum so that people, the citizens particularly, they feel secure. And it is so much true today, the way the war is going on in Ukraine, and you find that hospitals, schools, residential areas, bombarded without any sense. Those are the people who have developed all these ideas. of enlightenment, everything, and they're killing all those values. Yeah. So there should be some kind of, common. They thought that NATO will deter the adversary, but NATO is not able to deter the adversary. So the effort has to take a different direction. In which, the biggest problem is illiteracy, which is there, and there should be a global concern for it, so that nobody is illiterate on earth. This is the mission. He, in fact, he had it. Fanaticism is prevailing everything. Nobody should become a fanatic or communal or illegal taxations, which are prevailing at very many places. So all these things should be removed so that there should be some kind of uniformity. And you can see that the civilized world is now going to emerge before us. So this was the ideal he had in the mind. I fully agree with the vision he had in the mind and share all the concerns which are there. But let us see how much we are successful in doing that. But this is an alternative to what Marxism had thought about it. So it can, in fact, Marxism thought about it in terms of its own ideology, but here Dr. Gregorios goes much ahead of it, that kind of a thing. It is very much inclusive of all those things. And this is what is going to help us all for the peaceful existence and the development. Because development has to be there, otherwise, society will go to decay, kind of a thing. So,
Sir, can post-modernity in its approach satisfy India to be able to handle the intellectual spiritual crisis in which the West finds itself?
yes. In fact, in my book, the foreword he has written, Dr. Gregorios, he said that, look, postmodernity is not an ism, that means set of ideas and a program of action. It is simply an attitude or some kind of a nostalgia which the Western mind has. So that nostalgia could be because they thought that they can grasp the ungraspable, the absolute, but they have found that they cannot do it, so they became skeptical of it. So he said that it's basically a Western predicament. In the West, there is a crisis of narrative. So people are not able to explain many things in the Western terminological framework. And in literature, it was very much eminent. And then they started looking at the marginal aspect. So like murder, like sexuality, fantasy, sin, you have the guilt, you have the sin, but there is no philosophy of guilt or the philosophy of sin. You have the philosophy of redemption, yeah, but you do not have the philosophy of guilt or philosophy of sin. So they said that the postmodern narrative is something which is trying to explore these marginal issues and then come out with not a kind of a solution to any of the problems, but they are saying that these are the narratives which have been suppressed, and we do not want to give a kind of universal discourse on it. It will be very fragmented, rudimentary, very minor one, but we do need it. So I remember Jacques Derrida, when he had come to India in 1998, he had given a lecture at an auditorium in Mandi House. You see that auditorium of the Mandi House has the capacity of 1,000 people. It was all packed. And he spoke on madness, Artho and Bangkok. So this is such a small, minor topic, and he spoke on it for 3 hours. And there was a pin drop silence. Not even a movie we can find such a kind of a silence. And that was a very minor issue, but then it was encapsulating all the minor narratives which we already had, dropped from. So people found that these narratives can also attract the people, but it will attract as much as it will repel. So after a few hours, it will be gone case. You cannot hold it. So this is the predicament with the postmodernity, that the narrative is there, but I don't think that this uh, 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 this kind of a thing, the postmodern narrative. So can really solve the problems of the West, and it is still there. Uh, in India, in fact, the kind of plurality and fragmentation and everything we find in the literary works very profoundly there in most of the literary works, but we cannot take it as some kind of a narrative. He has said that this is an attempt of the post discourse phenomenon in India, and people do not want to develop any kind of grand narrative which will be binding on all. Like Marx, he has said the workers of the world unite, you have nothing to do but to change. No postmoderns will proclaim like this. They are not meant for, they are meant for only the marginalized people, the subalterns, the minorities, the, maybe the gender issues, maybe the race issues, these are the minor issues, but they are Holocaust or, dislocation of the people from one place, migration, these are the marginal issues which they used to address. These are important ones because that also requires some kind of a narrative, but it cannot be a grand narrative kind of phenomenon so that it can sustain everywhere. Many philosophers like Gargio Agamben, so he talks about the state being the, homo sacer. It creates, people with bare life only. So Dr. Gregorios was very critical about these tendencies. And in fact, in the foreword also, he has said that you have to detoxify yourself from the fumes of post-enlightenment philosophers and the enlightenment also. He says it's better to go to Jaina philosophy, then Sankhya philosophy, and then Mimamsa and Vedanta, and that will help you a lot to understand it. So this was the case about it, and this has, in fact, I've also been working on this kind of a thinking in my number of articles which are there, and this is indeed very fascinating thing.
So how can the study of Upanishads and Vedic literature can help us contribute in transforming individuals as better human beings?
In fact, exactly the same kind of a question was asked to him in Hyderabad, perhaps. I remember somebody had asked him, but he wanted to tease Dr. Gregorios. So, but I was smiling because I know that his answer will come very strongly in favor of the Upanishad, because he thought that maybe he is not so well acquainted with the Vedic and Upanishadic inscriptions. Then he gave, Dr. Gregorios said that there are, 6 dimensions in the Upanishads. There is a profound development of the theory of self in the Upanishads, Atman, Brahman, their relationship, and you will find it unparalleled anywhere, that Atman has. People have eulogized God, but Upanishads have, developed only the Atman, the self aspect of it, differentiating it with the Jiva. Then he said that there are ethical aspects, Purusartha, that means Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. So this is called, 2-tier value system. Dharma, Artha, and Kam on the one hand, this is achievement in the life, and then moksha is the attainment or fulfillment, and both are necessary. So first you work for everything, and then you look for the emancipation from it. Karma theory has been developed very profoundly in the Upanishads, and he gave number of examples that is from the Upanishads, that when Gita has come to develop it. This was the third aspect. Fourth aspect, he said that all sorts of yoga can be found out in the Upanishads only. And then he gave a very profound example of all the pramanas which are there in Indian philosophy. They are all rooted in the Upanishads. kind of a thing. Now, Upanishads are also having the final, the sixth point is that there is a plurality of viewpoints, that there may be certain viewpoints which are not there, but they can also be taken up together to give a kind of inclusive picture. And it was, there was I think 2-3 minutes applaud in the audience. There were around more than 200 people who had participated in that Congress. It was very big mela kind of a thing. And Hyderabad Central University had put up the tent. They didn't have the auditorium to accommodate so many people. So it was very fascinating kind of a thing. And his knowledge of Indian philosophy, Vedas, Upanishads, Sankhya, Jaina philosophy, and was so deep. Buddhism, Nagarjuna, he knew so much about that thing. And so is the case with the Western traditions. So in fact, as far intellectual journey is concerned, he is the one who can travel anywhere. So, and no culture was alien to him. And most of the languages were, he knew about it, in European languages, and also in India also. He spoke very good Hindi also to us, he talked to us on that. And of course, Malayalam and everything is there. So such a wonderful kind of a thing.
So what, according to you, is the task of philosophy in this 21st century?
In fact, a kind of a thing which we, as in the academics, we used to look at it, that now what is left there in the philosophy for us to do, kind of a thing. So because now we have seen multiculturalism, we have seen globalization, we have seen postmodernity, we have seen Soviet Union coming and then going back, kind of a thing. And this 21st century is something where we have so much of information, and we are, loaded with the tons of information. Anything you are looking for is there right on your table itself, with your computer. You click it and you will get everything. So the habit of reading a book and patiently is something which is disappearing. People don't read even 2 books in a year. They can eat 2 tons of biryani, but not two books. And I had seen that Dr. Gregorios was a very readable person. So he used to, read many texts, all the time. And, I think we should come back to the reading habit of it. And then some of the classics, if we read them, new meanings will emerge, new challenges will come. And the society is indeed moving to a, to a kind of a direction where, in fact, pluralistic perspective with media, and because we have to see what kind of power dominance is there, things like that, which is very challenging, for everybody and anybody. Anything happens anywhere in the world is going to affect everybody in the world. So philosophy has to be something which is global, which is universal, which can be shared, and also, in fact, if it doesn't fit, it can be critiqued also. So philosophy has got a new challenge, in the 21st century. So the values required to be redefined, because now the values are there in the laptop and computer and everywhere. So you cannot stop it. And then we are going to have a 5th generation and 6th generation kind of a thing. The role of a teacher will disappear. So because Google is a better teacher, the Google can give us all the information. So unless you are better than a Google, then you are good for nothing. So most of the people think that some of my friends in the US, they think that gradually universities will disappear, university educational system, and it will all be getting digitized. So you can have education online. Some of the very big companies like Apple and others, they do not look at the qualification which you have. They just know how to solve the crisis, the problem. So now education, curricula, degrees, and everything has to be redefined. So philosophy is a very big task now to fulfill. And I think in the few years' time, uh, the world is going to become very changed one. Our generation is in fact, I can say that we are the best and also the worst kind of people. We are best in the sense that we have all the informations before us. Everything is available to us. But then how to manage with it? That can become a kind of problem. The war is there. The war will be fought in the space only. People don't want to fight on the earth. Yeah. So you have to have developed your capability in the space only. So Akasha Tattva, has to be conquered. Akasha element. Vayu and water and air and earth, they already have polluted it. Now they want to have everything in the Akash, in the sky only. So the dimension is completely changing, and subject matter is changing. Discourse has to change. Responsibilities have to be changed. So in fact, we have to redefine ourselves therein. So no ism and no settled sort of values are going to help us. We have to become, again, coming back to the Swadhyaya aspect of it, that you see it, you think it, you make a judgment, and you decide. And coming back to what Buddha had said, that, you become your own master, Tathagata kind of a person. I always saw Dr. Gregorios walking alone there. In fact, people are there during the lecture and after that, but he will always prefer walking alone. In the morning, he will go a long walk, come back alone. And in the room also, of course, he was there single, but then he all the time, occupied with the thoughts. So what is called, in Buddhism, it is called that you be your own master. So apta deepo bhava, that be your own enlightened. So even the children also, they have learned so much. Yeah, you don't have to teach them. They rarely, in fact, you tell them to write a paper and they have all the information in the laptop in 2 hours time. The article is ready. And then they forget it. This is a kind of a thing where we have to rethink about our way of, being Swadhyaya and being Apta Deepo, that you become your own self-enlightened person. Nobody is there to enlighten you. So you have to get your own enlightenment on your own. You find the, people are in fact getting disappointed with university curricula, teaching and everything else, because it's not going to help them in any way. So it's indeed, in fact, this is a very touching question which you have raised. It requires to be answered in a systematic. I've been teaching for the last 43, 44 years at Jawaharlal Nehru University. And every time new challenges come up, but this challenge which is there at present, in which, all the values are crushed the way happening in Ukraine war. Bhima, children, institutions, hospitals, our residences, roads, you're destroying, what kind of, earth you are going to give to the next generation. And no Ukrainian will forgive the Russians in the next 100 years. Nobody will, because everybody is suffering. There, it's finished. Even if you have won, what is this winning when nobody is there? So we'll have, Putin lamenting like Yudhishthira in the Mahabharata, that he sees blood everywhere. Or like Ashoka, who had fought the Kalinga war, and he saw Bhima, children, disabled people, wounded people, with blood and everywhere. And then he thought that he's the responsible man for that. So this kind of a world is really something which is very, disgusting, I should say. But the younger generation is rebelling against it. In Russia, young people are leaving the country. They don't want to go to join the war. They're forcing people to come and join the army, but people are saying that we are not going to join the army and kill the people, innocent people. So they're forcing people to go there. So this is a kind of predicament which Europe is indeed in a tremendous crisis. In India, we can sustain because we have got still a value system which sustains us. So few days back, I was just listening to some data that the biggest problem in UK these days is that people do not want to have a family life. They will have a living relationships. 60% people are having living relationships. The concept of family is disappearing. But in India, we have a very strong sense of family concept. And that will sustain the values and everything else for a much longer time. And they are also looking for it. And you can see the crisis which whole of Europe is having. They are also realizing that, this crisis has to end up and values have to prevail. And philosophy has to come forward to propose, certain values which are so universal, compassionate, and can be shared with everybody. So these are important questions. But it remains still a problematic for all the intellectuals and thinkers and social reformers, those who are concerned with anything in the society and human life as such. They all have to think of it.
As you
So,
rightly said, Mar Gregorius, he had his own perspectives and ideas about humanity, and you
yes.
can very well associate with that. So, what, according to you, were his perspectives and understandings about humanity as a whole?
So, in fact, he did have a perspective on humanity as a whole, but it was not any kind of a totalitarian approach which he had, that there should be a single humanity with single set of thoughts and single practices, values, belief systems, and all that. He thought that there are plurality of viewpoints, and all the viewpoints have truth content and also the falsity content. And then you have to find out. In fact, I remember one incident where he has said that suppose I say that everybody has a right to live a good quality of life, then what could be a good quality of life? Is Christianity a good quality of life, or Hinduism, or Buddhism, or Islam, or socialism, or democracy, liberalism? And then he said, no, there are good points in every system, every ideas, but we have to see how much we can incorporate. Because if you stick to one thing, you'll become narcissist. So let us have the celebrate the plurality with the unity, sense of unity, kind of a thing. So that everybody is included, yet nobody is prevailing over anybody. And he used to give this kind of a feedback everywhere. And this was the, in fact, his message to the, humanity. And it is still very true, as much true as when Dr. Gregorios was alive, and it is still very much true. And this is what we are all looking for, that unity in diversity, that pluralities have to be accepted. Europe is also accepting it. So that it will, get rid of the dominance aspect of it, So these are the things.
So, my last question with regarding to this interview.
Yeah,
Mark,
indeed.
yes, Mark Gregorius says that the real problem of our society is the horrid marriage of decadent religion and rotten politics. How relevant, sir, is this statement in the current scenario?
Yes. So, in fact, this, unholy marriage between religion and politics. Yeah. So he was against it. In fact, I remember when some political dignitaries were invited for these seminars, he was not at all in favor of those things. Why to invite these people? Yeah. In fact, the seminar he had organized in 1992, he did not invite any politician. He said only the academicians will come here, because politicians, let them do their own job. So he said that politics is there. It's a game which people are playing, and everybody has to participate into it. But then there is a rotten sense of doing it, of manipulating and subjugating and trying to, get the power at hand. Coming back to the number game and to the power, that becomes the target. But they do not think of the masses, appeal of the masses, requirement of the whole humanity, so that the transformation should go to the least privileged ones in the society. So some of the religions are also like that. They are just getting the funds and all that stuff and doing nothing, in the society. So they have their own mathas and everything else. He says such things should not happen. Even the temples and everything else should come forward for the, to address human problems of the humanity. And all the rotten ideas, because ideas are there, they are true for some time, but then they require to be swadhyaya. They have to be required to, self-reflection kind of a thing should take place. Otherwise, it becomes, very, rotten kind of a thing, and then they mix it up with politics. That also the rotten politics. Only they will go with the rotten ideas. So this is a horrid marriage between them. So it's a very unholy kind of an act, and one has to be vigilant about it. And education is a means to have that vigilance to it. Philosophy can help us to sustain and to develop oneself in that direction. So this is a kind of, thing he had, and we are all trying to have it there. And I think you have raised very important questions, of which I had not even thought of. So, but anyway, it gave me to have a fresh look. Now, again, I'm in the period of 1980 to 1996 period. My interactions with Dr. Gregorios.
Thank you.
And the kind of fascinating which he has given. And about Derrida, Adorno, he was speaking. Then he said that Adorno was a musicologist also. Dr. Gregorios was very fond of music, painting, art, architecture.
Yes.
That was a dimension which we could not get much explored with philosophy, kind of a thing.
He started even study school, a music school in Delhi, with regard to the church.
Yeah. So that was also one of his personalities. So he was multifaceted. And thank you very much for inviting me. And thank you very much for raising these questions, which are very substantive, very intellectually stimulating. And I think you have taken up the philosophical quest of Dr. Gregorios, very deeply, very seriously, in a very committed manner. I wish you all the very best.
Thank you so much.